UK column. Great to have you back with us. Now, you've got a little bit of film footage here of somebody who's been interrogated by the Israelis, and they're speaking out. What have you got to tell us?
I've decided to go only for a still, Brian, because I thought that if I were to pick out a section of video, it would perhaps give an incomplete and therefore misleading impression of what is in the video clips. So before we bring it on screen to tell people what has been going on, Shin Bet is the Israeli Domestic Security Service, the equivalent of the FBI or MI5, although it has rather more powers than either of those. And Shin Bet has been bearing the brunt of the blame within Israel itself, as far as I am understanding it, although I'm not a specialist in that region, but I'm reading this widely, for having failed to foresee and forestall what was going on in Gaza in the lead up to the 7th of October attacks. Now Shin Bet has come up with a video of about 12 minutes, we'll bring that on screen now, which consists of spliced together interviews of perhaps 5 detainees, all wearing these dark brown detainee sweatshirts, I would call them. They're certainly not jumpsuits. I want to use accurate language. And they are all being interviewed according to the on-screen time and date stamps. It would be a week after the attack, so mid-October, but it's just been released now. The upload I'm sharing here is a re-upload by Jonathan Sacerdoti, and that will be in the show notes. The first surprise is they're all being interviewed in office settings. There is a difference between them all, Brian. Some are in a more comfortable furnished setting like this and are not handcuffed. Others are handcuffed. 1 or 2 have deeply blooded white T-shirt sides. You could say, if you were cynical, that's because Shin Bet wants to show off that they're fresh captives. I don't know. It could indicate they've been in their clothes for longer. Some are handcuffed, as I say, some are not. Most are looking down and dejected like this. I'm no expert in whether people have been tortured or not. I did rub shoulders quite closely with the specialist interrogators for that part of the world within the British and American intelligence system. 15, 20 years ago, they were considering making me one of their own. The vetting officer said, no, it's too risky with your backstory. But I have mixed in that milieu. I would say, and I should also mention that the language is accurate. Again, Arabic is not one of my main languages, but there are always people in such situations saying this is fake subtitling. That very, very rarely happens, except when people make silly claims about what Putin said. Subtitling in Arabic and Hebrew is almost always painstakingly accurate. You have to look levels deeper than that if you think a spin is going on. What I take out of it is that these men were genuinely perpetrators of the attacks. They do confess with prodding questions, but no browbeating going on in the interview setting itself. They confessed that they had been told either to massacre women and children or to take as many as possible captive, being offered the prize of an apartment for each one they took back, and to use them as human shields. In the second half, they are given even more leading questions by Shin Bet in Arabic. Obviously, they're using the native language of the detainees, and they're being asked first, who do you think's responsible for this attack and new war? And as if on cue, they name the well-known leaders of Hamas who are in exile now in Qatar and Turkey. They name Khalid Mishal and Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar, the main men, and say these men just led us like lambs to the slaughter from afar and they don't care. Even more tellingly towards the end, I think this is where Shin Bet could be described even by pro-Israeli sources as being on thin ice. The interrogators say, but this is anti-Quranic and not Islamic, isn't it? And they all, in body language that I as a non-expert understand to be fairly authentic, say, yes, you're quite right. We're not allowed to murder non-combatants, certainly not women and children, least of all babies. And they don't get further than that. They don't say I was programmed or I was duped, but they do say, our objective was to capture and hold these areas and bring as many Israeli citizens alive or dead back with us as possible. I don't know what your thoughts are, because you, of course, have had, going back some years, some experience with this as well. I wouldn't dare say whether they were tortured or ill-treated before these recordings, but I would say that it would be a bit shallow to reject such a recording as completely fabricated or propaganda.
Alex, thank you very much for that. It's a difficult subject. We've put that up and you've given a narrative on it, which is in the middle of the road, as I think it should be. I'm just going to say to the audience that it was Alex that gave me a book called The History of Torture, which was about Britain's own failings in numerous countries around the world, torturing people at various times of our history. So this is the reality of brutal wars, and we're going to have to see how things develop and what more information comes forward on this. I'm just going to move back into the BBC and how the BBC reports on the wars. Let's have a look at this page here. Now, I've put a title in, BBC balances the Gaza dead against Israeli military operations. And this is the top line there, where you've got bullet holes, gutted rooms, a father that lost all his children. Then it moves across to Bolivia's comments as it severs diplomatic ties, but eventually